Don't embarrass me, my sister Audrey hissed, gripping my arm outside the private dining room. Mark's dad is a federal judge. Just smile and say you work in law. So I smiled. I said nothing. An hour later, under golden lights and clinking wine glasses, she introduced me to her in-laws as Grace, the family disappointment. My parents laughed softly. Mark looked away. Then Judge Reynolds stood, reached across the table, and took my hand. "Your Honor," he said. "Good to see you again." Audrey's wine glass slipped, shattered, and that was when the real secret began unraveling. People always assumed silence meant I had nothing to say. In my family, silence was the only room I was allowed to take up. My name is Grace Whitmore. I was 48 years old, and strangers often told me I looked too calm for the work I did. Maybe it was the neat dark hair, the pearl earrings, the fitted coats, the kind of face people called beautiful before they realized I was listening more than I was speaking. I had spent years in federal law, long enough to learn that the most dangerous people rarely raised their voices. At home, though, none of that mattered. To my parents, Robert and Elaine, I was the quiet daughter, the careful one, the one who brought store-bought pie to Thanksgiving and helped wash dishes while everyone praised Audrey for bringing a centerpiece she had ordered online. Audrey was my older sister, 51, perfect smile, perfect posture, perfect talent for turning every family dinner into a small awards ceremony for herself. When we were kids, she got the front of the refrigerator, report cards, debate trophies, glossy school photos. I got the side panel near the pantry, held up by a weak magnet shaped like a strawberry. That sounds small until you spend your whole life standing on the side panel, by adulthood. Audrey had made superiority look like concern. "Grace is just private," she would say, touching my shoulder like I was fragile. "She's never cared about big things." My mother would sigh and nod. My father would add, "She's practical. There's nothing wrong with practical." They knew I worked in law. That was the phrase I gave them, and they never cared enough to ask for more. It suited everyone. Audrey could keep calling herself the successful daughter. My parents could keep their tidy little family story. And I could go home to my quiet townhouse in Alexandria, lock the door, take off my heels, and breathe. Then Audrey met Mark. Mark Carter was handsome in that polished Washington way, all clean shirts and careful manners. He worked at a major law firm, came from old money, and listened when Audrey talked. But the real jewel, to her, was his father, Judge Reynolds. From the moment Audrey learned Mark's dad was a federal judge, she stopped talking about love and started talking about legacy. 3 weeks before the engagement dinner, she called me while I was trimming roses in my backyard. "Grace," she said, bright and sharp, "I need you to come, and please, for once, don't make this harder than it has to be." The restaurant sat behind smoked glass and a brass door in Washington, the kind of place where even the host whispered. I arrived 10 minutes early because Audrey had texted me 3 times about punctuality. My navy dress was simple, my earrings were pearls. My coat still smelled faintly like the roses I had been trimming before I left home. Audrey spotted me before I reached the private room. She was wearing white. Of course she was. White silk, bare shoulders, diamond bracelet. Hair swept back like she was already walking down an aisle. She smiled at a waiter, then grabbed my elbow hard enough to pinch. "Grace," she said through her teeth. "Listen to me." I looked down at her hand. "Hello to you, too." Her smile stayed frozen for the room behind us. Her voice dropped. "Don't embarrass me. Mark's dad is a federal judge." There it was. Not hello. Not thank you for coming. A warning. "I know who he is," I said. Audrey gave a small laugh, the kind she used when she wanted me to feel slow. "No, you don't." "Not really. These people are serious. They know senators. They sit on boards. They have dinner with people who actually matter." My arm still hurt under her fingers. "So, what would you like me to do?" I asked. "Smile. Be pleasant. If someone asks what you do, just say you work in law. Do not get into details. Do not make it weird. And please don't mention that little house of yours like it's some big accomplishment. A waiter passed carrying warm bread. For 1 second, butter and rosemary filled the air, soft and ordinary. And I almost laughed because nothing about that moment felt ordinary. I said nothing. Audrey took my silence as obedience. She patted my arm as if rewarding a child. Good. Tonight is important. Inside. The table was already glowing under low gold lights. My parents sat near Mark, beaming like they had personally arranged his bloodline. Judge Reynolds sat at the far side, silver-haired and composed. Beside him were his wife, Margaret, and his daughter, Claire, who watched the room with sharp, quiet eyes. Mark stood when I entered. Grace. Right. I'm glad you came. Before I could answer. Audrey slid between us. My little sister, she said brightly. Grace has always been different. My mother chuckled into her water glass. My father gave me that familiar polite nod, the one he used for bank tellers and distant cousins. Dinner began with wedding talk. Audrey described venues, guest lists, flowers, the kind of cake that needed its own lighting every few minutes. She glanced at Judge Reynolds to see if he looked impressed. Then Margaret asked, "And what do you do?" Grace Audrey jumped in. "Oh, Grace works around courts, legal things. Nothing exciting." She touched my shoulder. "She's our family disappointment, but we love her anyway." The fork in my hand went still. No one laughed. Mark blinked. Claire looked up from her wine. Judge Reynolds slowly turned his eyes toward me. My father cleared his throat. "Audrey just means Grace has never chased status. She's comfortable with less," my mother added softly. The words landed harder because they sounded kind. Claire tilted her head. "What kind of legal work? Federal criminal law?" I said. Audrey's smile twitched. Same old Grace, always making it sound more dramatic. But Judge Reynolds was no longer looking at Audrey. He was looking at me like the past had just walked into the room wearing pearls. And for the first time that night, I realized Audrey had not brought me there to be family. She had brought me there to be proof. For a moment, nobody moved. Audrey kept smiling, but I could see the panic beginning under her skin. It started near her jaw. One tight little pulse. Then moved to her eyes. "Federal criminal law," Claire repeated. "That sounds pretty specific." "It sounds more important than it is," Audrey said quickly. Grace has always been good at making quiet jobs sound mysterious. I stared at the white tablecloth. A drop of condensation slid down my water glass and darkened the linen. I watched it spread, slow and silent. The way my life had spread around my family without them ever noticing. I thought of every Thanksgiving where Audrey sat beside my father and told stories about promotions, charity boards, men who adored her, women who envied her. I thought of my mother asking me if I was still doing court paperwork while I scraped cranberry sauce from dinner plates. I thought of the Christmas dinner Audrey insisted on paying for. "I know money gets tight for you," she had said, loud enough for the table to hear. I had smiled then, too, not because it was funny, because correcting her would have required explaining that my life was not small, that my house was not a sad little place, that my work was not background noise, that I had sat in rooms where people's futures changed with one sentence, and still came home to a family that treated me like a footnote. Silence had once felt like mercy. Now it felt like a cage I had helped build. Judge Reynolds rested his hand beside his plate. He had recognized me. I knew it. His eyes carried that careful professional restraint judges learn after years of hearing people lie with confidence. He could have exposed me right there. Instead, he waited. That was the first kindness anyone at that table gave me. Audrey leaned toward Margaret, trying to drag the conversation back to safe ground. "Anyway, Mark and I were thinking about a fall wedding. Something elegant, not too crowded. Maybe 400 guests." "400 is not crowded," Claire asked dryly. Audrey laughed too loudly. "Well, for families like ours." "Families like ours?" My father nodded, proud and hungry for the compliment that had not been offered. My mother adjusted her pearls. Then Audrey looked at me again. "You understand, don't you?" "Grace," she said, "some people are built for bigger lives. Some people know their limits. That's not a bad thing. My fingers loosened around the napkin in my lap. There it was, the sentence that finally broke something clean inside me. Not because it was new, because it was old. Because I had heard it dressed up as concern, humor, advice, prayer, pity. Because everyone at that table had been invited to agree that I was less. And for the first time, someone there knew it was a lie. Judge Reynolds looked at my sister, then at my parents. "What makes you think Grace isn't successful?" The question landed quietly. Audrey blinked. "Excuse me." He did not repeat himself. My mother's lips parted. My father shifted in his chair. Mark looked from his father to me. Confused now. Really confused. I set my napkin on the table. For years, I had waited for my family to ask who I was. They never did. So, when the room went still, I finally lifted my eyes and decided I would stop waiting. Audrey recovered first. She always did. Her laugh came out bright and brittle. "Successful, I mean. Success is different for everyone. Judge Reynolds. Grace has a steady job. We're proud of that." My father nodded too fast. Very proud. My mother reached for her water. Of course. No one looked proud. They looked nervous. Judge Reynolds folded his hands. "That is not what I asked." The room tightened. Audrey's face changed by one careful inch. The smile stayed, but the warmth disappeared. "Well," she said, "Grace works around courts. She's private. She never married. She drives an old car. She lives quietly. There's nothing wrong with that, but let's not pretend it's the same as building something." Claire's eyes flicked to me. Mark whispered, "Audrey." "What?" Audrey snapped, then softened her voice when she remembered where she was. "I'm just being honest. Honest." That word had done more damage in my family than cruelty ever could. I looked at Judge Reynolds. He gave me the smallest nod. Not permission. Recognition. Audrey reached for her wine. "Can we please stop interrogating my sister? She hates attention." "No," I said. It was not loud, but it cut through the table. Audrey froze with her glass halfway to her mouth. "I don't hate attention," I said. "I hate being turned into a warning label." Her eyes narrowed. "Grace, don't start. I didn't start this." The silence was so complete I could hear the vent humming above the private room, somewhere outside. A server laughed, then a plate clinked. My father leaned forward. "Grace, this is not the time." "It never is," I said. Audrey's mouth opened, but Judge Reynolds stood slightly, just enough that everyone felt it. Then he extended his hand across the table to me. His voice was calm, formal. "Clear, Your Honor. Good to see you again." For 1 second, nobody understood. Then they understood all at once. Mark's head turned toward me. Margaret's eyebrows lifted. Claire sat back like she had just found the missing page of a story she had been reading all night. Audrey laughed. "No," she said. "No, that's not—" "He's being polite." I reached across and shook his hand. "Good to see you, too." "Judge Reynolds." My sister's face drained of color. Judge Reynolds remained standing. "Grace and I have worked together through several legal conferences and professional panels. She is one of the most thoughtful judges I know." The word judges hit the table like a dropped stone, my mother whispered. Judges Claire had already taken out her phone. She scrolled quickly, her expression sharpening. "There are public profiles," she said. "Articles, professional listings, Grace Whitmore, federal judge." Audrey turned on me. "You told us you worked in law." "I do. You let us think you were nobody. I let you think what you wanted. That is lying." "No," I said. "Lying is introducing your sister as the family disappointment because you thought no one important would know better." Mark pushed back from the table slightly, his chair scraping the floor. Audrey looked at him. "Mark, you know me. She's doing this on purpose." He stared at her. Doing what, being who she is? That scared her more than my title did. I could see it. The engagement, the wedding, the polished future she had built in her head. All of it had rested on one simple idea: she was the impressive sister. I was the soft shadow behind her. Now the shadow had a nameplate. My father's voice came out rough. "Grace, why didn't you tell us I looked at him?" "Really looked? When would I have done that? Between Mom calling my work paperwork and Audrey calling my life small, at which dinner were you ready to hear it?" My mother flinched. Audrey stood. "How dare you make us look like fools?" "You did that," I said. Her hand shook around the stem of her wine glass. "No," she whispered. "You planned this. You wanted to humiliate me." "I wanted to eat dinner without being reduced to a punchline. You ruined everything." "No. Audrey, you built everything on needing me beneath you." I just stopped kneeling. Her fingers slipped. Sister's wine glass shattered. Red wine spread across the floor like a wound under the golden lights. Tiny shards glittered near her shoes. No one moved to clean it up. For 13 years. I had swallowed every small insult to keep peace at tables that never made room for me. That night, I stood. "I won't be your disappointment anymore," I said. "Find another way to feel successful." Then I picked up my coat and walked out while the room behind me finally learned what silence could cost. By the time I reached the sidewalk, the cold air felt cleaner than anything inside that room. I sat in my car for almost 10 minutes with my hands on the steering wheel. The leather was cold. My breath fogged the windshield. Through the restaurant windows, I could still see soft gold light and moving shadows, like the dinner was continuing without me. Then my phone began to shake. Audrey called first, then my mother, then my father. The messages came in one after another. "You embarrassed your sister. You should have told us. This was not the way to handle family." Audrey's message was the longest. "You destroyed my life tonight. Mark barely spoke to me after you left. His parents looked at me like I was trash. I hope you're happy." I read it twice. Then I turned the phone face down. Because not one message said, "I'm sorry." Not one said, "We should never have let her speak to you that way." The next morning, Claire called. I almost didn't answer, but something in me needed to hear a voice that had not spent my whole life shrinking me. "Grace," she said gently, "I just wanted you to know Mark paused the engagement." I closed my eyes. "I'm sorry," I said. "Don't be. This isn't because you're a judge. It's because last night showed him something he can't unsee." A week later, Judge Reynolds invited me to coffee after a professional meeting. Nothing dramatic, no gossip, just 2 paper cups, a quiet corner, and the kind of respect that did not require performance. "My son is heartbroken," he said, "but heartbreak is better than marrying a lie." "Audrey isn't a lie," I said. "No," he answered, "but the version of herself she sold him was." I carried that sentence home with me. 3 weeks later, Audrey appeared at my office. No designer dress, no perfect lipstick, just jeans, tired eyes, and a face that looked younger without all that armor. She stood in the doorway, staring at the shelves, the case files, the framed degrees, the heavy stillness of the room. "So this is real," she said. "Yes." "You're really a judge." "Yes." Her mouth trembled. Mark ended it. I heard. She looked wounded that I did not sound pleased. "You got what you wanted," she said. I leaned back in my chair. "If you think I wanted you broken, then you still don't understand what happened. What happened is you humiliated me." "No." "Audrey," I stopped participating. That landed harder than I expected. She looked down at her hands. "I don't know who I am if I'm not the successful one," she whispered. For the first time, I almost saw my sister, not the golden child, not the performer, just a woman terrified of becoming ordinary. So I gave her the truth without cruelty. "Then find out. But don't use me as the floor you stand on." My parents tried, too. Once their friends heard about me. My mother left a message saying they were proud. My father asked if we could have dinner. I called back and said, "I'm not interested in being celebrated because other people finally approve of me." There was silence. Good, some silences are cages, others are doors. That night, I went home to my quiet townhouse in Alexandria. I took off my pearl earrings, poured 1 glass of red wine, and set it on the coffee table. It stayed whole, for the first time in years. So did I. For years, I believed silence kept my family together. I was wrong. Silence only kept everyone comfortable while I disappeared one piece at a time. After that dinner, people asked if I felt satisfied. The honest answer is no. Satisfaction sounds too small. What I felt was lighter, like I had finally set down a suitcase I forgot I was carrying. Audrey did not lose Mark because of me. She lost him because Truth walked into the room and sat down at the table. And me, I stopped being the family disappointment. I stopped being the quiet sister everyone edited down to make someone else shine. If you've ever had to protect your peace from your own family, share your story in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one.